Rev up your engines!
Mario Cortez says, what do you think about Toyota 4Runners? Well, they're interesting vehicles. Toyota just had the pickup trucks, right? And then they came up with the idea, let's get rid of the bed, put a couple more seats, turn it into what we'll call an SUV, and start selling them. Well, guess what? They took off like gangbusters since then. They've sold millions of those things. People love the 4Runners. Now they're a far cry from the early 4Runners. I had customers with some of the early ones here in Houston, and they were basically a pickup truck with extra seats in the back. But now they're kind of luxury SUVs. They're not cheap. They're not giving them away, and they're no longer, you know, a small size. They're pretty big vehicles. If you can afford the price, they can last an awful long time. 326 says, Scotty, is a BMW 320 around 2003 with a 2.2-liter engine reliable in Europe? Well, you know, actually they can be. Here in the United States, parts cost a fortune, but in Europe, when I go there, people have them and they love them. Now, most of the cars that you're driving in Europe, hey, they were all made in Germany. That thing was made in Germany. Better made cars. A lot of the stuff in the United States is not made in Germany. Quality isn't as good. So I tell people, you want a luxury car? Get a Lexus. You know why? Because all the Lexus cars are still made in Japan. They do make some of the Lexus SUVs, but they make them in Cambridge, Ontario, and the Canadians do a really good job. But as for their sedans, hey, they're all still made in Japan by Japanese, and the quality's just better. And if you get a car made in Germany by Germans, yeah, the quality is better than the stuff that we get here in the States all the time. In Christ I rest says, Scotty, what do you think about buying a used Smart for $2? Well, you can get them cheap in the United States. The resale value is... Those are made in France, and it's German engineering. Mercedes has something to do with it, and they're very tiny little cars. From what I read, they're only going to be making electric cars now in Europe, and I wouldn't be surprised if they actually just pull out of the United States entirely. They never had much of a dealership set up here anyways. They're fun to tool around in, and I got a customer with one I drive around, but I mean, I personally wouldn't seem dead in one of those things on a highway. Tiny little thing, and here we got these giant 18-wheelers and big off-road trucks in Texas on the road. You know, one of those tiny things, who you don't feel very secure, you know, and they aren't that fast, so it's not like you're on a motorcycle and you can go fast and zip around them, and that thing, yeah, you can't because they're not that quick. If you want a toy to toy around in inner city and you can get it cheap used, why not? Just realize that it's going to be expensive getting parts for them. If you get one that's low mileage. F1 Tannen says, hi Scotty, what do you think about Edsel? I'm assuming you mean the car and not Edsel Ford, the son of Ford. So if you don't mean the car, kind of funny, I got a customer who owns one and he loves the car. What happened was, when I made the Edsel, they brought it out too early, they didn't test it right, and they had all kinds of problems, and then they gave up with it. But of course now it's a semi-collector's item because most people destroyed them or they drove them, they fell apart, put them in a junkyard. But today a restored Edsel is actually worth a reasonable amount of money. You know, it's a big monster yacht American car, you know, from those days when they had big giant yachtmobiles with huge engines that got horrible gas mileage. People do collect them now, believe it or not. You know, the joke is on them now that the Edsel could be worth a whole bunch of money. Jonathan Pando says, do you think a 2000 Pontiac Montana van could last a long time with low maintenance? No. Not unless you're the luckiest man on the planet. Those Montanas, I had customers with them, and as they aged, they had nothing but problems. And these were people that took care of the vehicles. They changed the oil regularly. They changed the coolant once every 4 or 5 years. They took care of them, but they still fell apart on them. And of course, Pontiac, they're not making Pontiacs anymore. So, I mean, no, I would not buy a Montana van. I mean, if somebody gave you one or you got one that's, it's 20 years old now for $500 and it's a knockaround vehicle, go right ahead. But as soon as something big started to go wrong, get rid of it. Don't put a bunch of money into something like that. John D says, Scotty, how would you go about getting an old MGB to run that's set for 30 years? Whoo-wee, 30 years, a long time. First thing I would do, okay, it's an old MGB. So, carbureted. First thing I would do is I would take all the spark plugs out and I'd put some Marvel Mystery Oil. I'd squirt some in each cylinder and I'd let it sit for 24 hours. I would get a long cheater bar in a socket, put it on the front of the crank, and I would try to turn that engine over by hand 360 degrees. Because if it only turns a little and then stops, the engine's locked up inside. And then you're going to have to take the whole engine apart. I mean, you could soak it for days then with some Marvel Mystery Oil in it. But once you get that, if you do turn it, it goes more than 360 degrees, more in a full circle, and it doesn't bind, then put a battery in it, get some starting fluid, and see if you can start the thing. Who knows? But a lot of times those old English cars, man, they had a lot of steel in them, and they'll just lock right up, right up, sitting that long.
So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.